Hello. So I wanted to do another quick follow-up video to one or two that I've done in the past regarding Walksnail and antennas. I just want to go in a slightly more in depth into it to explain a little bit further. There are videos by JB and Bruce XJet that kind of delve into this in a lot more depth. I just want to kind of touch upon it and try and wrap it all up into one video. Basically, it's the difference between a patch antenna and an omni antenna and what they're going to do for us with Walksnail. A quick recap that basically a patch antenna and an omni antenna are the same as a round balloon and a long balloon. Imagine you're in the center of the balloon and your omni antenna can see in all directions equally. With the patch antenna, you're standing at the end of the balloon and you can see further in one direction, but you obviously can't see very far behind you or to each side. How far and how narrow that balloon's going to be will depend on the decibel level of your antenna. The higher the dB, the narrower the balloon, but the further that you can see. The lower the dB of the patch, the closer it then slowly starts to become an omni. In FPV, an omni antenna is generally around 3 dB or less, and a patch antenna is kind of going to be around 7 dB and more. And obviously, the higher the dB level, the narrower that field of view becomes. Now, why is that important for us with Walksnail? And it's the reason why I kind of run the VAS Cyclops. Basically, Walksnail has one TX antenna and 3 receive antennas. Now, what that means is Walksnail isn't diversity. Now, what is diversity? Well, back in the old analog days, when we first started out in FPV, our analog goggles had one antenna, and whatever was being broadcast was picked up by that antenna. As technology improved, we started seeing diversity receivers. Basically what that meant was, regardless of where the signal was coming from, whichever of the two antennas was picking up the strongest signal displayed your image on the goggles. Analog then went a step further and we started seeing things like mix mode, and that's kind of with the fusion style analog receivers. And basically what that did was, instead of one antenna being displayed, whichever one was being the strongest, both of them took their images, took what they were receiving, mixed it together, and that was what was displayed on the goggles. Some goggles, like some Sky Zone goggles, took that even a step further with quadversity, where basically there was 4 antennas, and each one of those antennas was contributing what they were receiving. The image was being merged together and displayed on your screens. Now, a lot of where the confusion I think comes from is because DJI basically took that diversity style reception and merged it into their goggles. And just like the Walksnail, DJI has 4 antennas, but the difference between the Walksnail antennas and the DJI antennas is DJI has 2 transmits and 2 receives, and it works a bit like how the analog diversity worked. It's taking the strongest of the signals and displaying it on the screen. Because digital FPV is a two-way communication, the TX is sending information back to the VTX while the RX is receiving it. Because DJI has 2 TX and 2 RX, it means whichever of those is kind of getting the strongest signal, it'll be the one that's doing the work. Now, how that differs from Walksnail is because Walksnail only has 1 TX and the 3 RX. So that means Walksnail is more akin to the analog mix rather than an analog diversity mix, because it only has that 1 TX, and as we know, digital transmission is a two-way process. So the reason then why I have been telling people to run patches, or at least run 4 antennas that are closely matched and closely aligned, is because of that one TX. And for me, the way I look at it is, if I need to point that one TX antenna at my craft, or I need that one TX antenna to be in communication with the craft, then whatever I put on that TX point, I might as well put on the rest, because mixing and matching is going to give you a mixed experience. Some of your antennas are going to be in range while some of them aren't, and so you're always going to have a handicap or a limit on what you can receive, because remember, the 3 RX antennas are merging what they're receiving and displaying on the goggles. So if you have a mix and a match of antenna, then maybe only one of your antenna is actually in receipt of the video feed that's coming in, and that's going to limit your bit rate, while the other 2 are basically doing nothing until the craft comes back around or comes out from behind the wall, and then all of a sudden everything works and receiving. So for me, whatever you put on the TX antenna, you might as well put on the rest of them. And in my opinion, patch antennas are the way to go, because even though, like the balloons, the patch antenna can't really see that far behind, and it's a narrow frontal beam, you still do have some rear view and so if you're flying in front of you predominantly, then you might as well use a patch antenna. If you're flying a little bit behind you, your patch antenna is still going to be able to see, not maybe quite as far as your patch antenna is going to be able to see in front, but you're still going to get 50 to maybe 100 meter range, or 20 meters behind a building, or that kind of thing. Now obviously, if you are flying within a courtyard or in a bando and you're in the center and you're flying equally in every direction, well then sure, an omni antenna is going to be the way to go. But you might as well then have an omni on all 4 ports. So basically, to wrap it up, we have to think of Walksnail not as diversity like DJI, but more like our mix receivers on analog, and they will each take the video, merge it together, and the limiting factor is going to be the fact that there's one TX, and that has to be in communication with the craft, because even if we lose the other ones, there's still kind of a bit of a communication going on there. But if you lose that checks and balances TX point and it can't talk to the VTX, then everything just stops, and it doesn't matter what the other ones are doing. So remember, it's not like DJI. Each of these 4 points work together to form a single kind of entity, a single unit, and that's what we kind of need to remember. So hopefully that brief, quick fly through explains a little bit more.